All right, let's jump into this leadership deep dive.
Yeah.
You've given us quite a bit from Jocko Willink's Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual.
Yeah.
It seems like you're really looking for actionable stuff, not just the theory. And, well, I mean, a former Navy SEAL commander, kind of the perfect person to learn from, right?
Absolutely. Willink's not just someone who just writes about this stuff. He's been there in the thick of it, leading troops in some of the most intense combat situations imaginable, like, the Battle of Ramadi.
Oh.
And now he's taking those really, really hard-won lessons and sharing them as a leadership consultant. Yeah.
And the format of the book, it's like an actual field manual, right?
Yeah.
Meant for quick reference. Like you're in the field, you need an answer now.
Yeah.
Not a bunch of abstract concepts.
Exactly. And one of the things that hits you right away is how much Willink, emphasizes learning by doing, especially learning from mistakes. He's really open about his own early slip-ups as a junior SEAL. Really highlights how important it is to have mentors. People who've been there to guide you.
Yeah. He's got that incredible story about the oil platform training. Have you ever, thought about what an oil platform assault would even be like?
Oh, man.
It's like this giant three-dimensional maze, all metal grating, open spaces, you're completely exposed. Talk about a high-pressure situation.
Yeah, intense doesn't even begin to describe it.
No kidding. And Willink, still a junior SEAL at this point, does something that, well, it seems counterintuitive, but it helps the team succeed. He actually steps back from the action, like physically steps away. What's the thought process there?
It's this concept he calls detachment. He creates some distance, and that gives him a wider view, a broader perspective, one that nobody else has at that moment.
Yeah.
He can see the whole picture and figure out the best way forward, even though he's the lowest ranking guy there.
That's amazing. And I think, honestly, we've all been in those situations where we get so bogged down in the details that we can't see the forest for the trees.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you think detachment, can you actually cultivate that, even outside of, a tactical situation?
Oh, for sure. It's a skill. And like any skill, you can develop it with practice. It's about taking that step back consciously, whether it's an argument that's getting heated or a complicated problem at work. Take a breath, observe, analyze. You can get a much clearer view and make a more informed decision that way.
It makes you wonder how many bad decisions, how many conflicts could have been avoided if we just, took a second to detach.
Yeah, absolutely. And Willink, he keeps coming back to this idea throughout the book, showing how detachment applies to leadership in any field, not just the military.
Okay, so another thing that really jumped out, the contrast between these two platoon commanders Willink worked with, shows you the impact of leadership style, like nothing else. One was super arrogant, the other incredibly humble, even though both were super experienced.
This arrogant commander, it's almost like a case study in what not to do as a leader. Always throwing his rank around, wouldn't listen to his team, made decisions in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Well, it nearly caused a mutiny.
Wait, a mutiny? That's serious business, right?
Oh, yeah. Things got so bad that the enlisted guys actually went to the commanding officer to request the platoon commander be removed.
Wow.
They knew they were risking serious consequences, but that's how desperate they were for a change in leadership.
So what did the CO do?
He removed the arrogant commander, made it clear that insubordination wasn't going to fly, but he also saw that something was fundamentally broken in the platoon. The commander's arrogance, it had poisoned the well, destroyed the team's trust.
Okay, so what happened to the platoon then? Did they just, fall apart without a leader?
They got a new platoon commander, a guy called Delta Charlie. Basically a legend in the SEAL teams.
Wow.
Came up through the ranks, enlisted to officer, experienced in every SEAL role you can imagine, even saw combat in Grenada.
Okay, so clearly super accomplished.
Yeah.
But what set him apart from the arrogant commander?
Humility. All those accomplishments. But Delta Charlie was known for listening, for empowering his team, genuine respect for everyone.
So instead of barking orders, demanding obedience, he actually listened and valued input.
Exactly. And the effect on the platoon was incredible. They went from a dysfunctional, almost mutinous unit to one of the most effective Willink ever served with.
Powerful example of leading with humility, creating an environment where everyone feels valued, respected.
Yeah.
It makes me think about the leaders I've encountered. Which style resonates more with you, the arrogant top-down or the humble collaborative?
I think for most people, it's pretty clear. We're drawn to leaders who respect us, value our opinions, leaders who create an environment where we can contribute our best.
Makes you wonder why some leaders still cling to that old authoritarian style when the evidence for humility and collaboration is so strong.
Maybe it's fear of losing control or thinking they have to project this image of strength and authority all the time.
Yeah.
But as Willink shows, real strength comes from building trust and empowering your team, not ruling with an iron fist.
Definitely food for thought. And there's so much more to unpack as we keep going with this deep dive into Willink's leadership principles.
Yeah, and one of the really interesting things he argues is that the lessons he learned in combat, they apply to any area of life.
That's interesting.
Business, family dynamics, you name it.
It's true. We tend to think of leadership as this thing for CEOs or politicians or generals.
Yeah.
But really, we're all leaders in some way, right?
Absolutely. Leading a team at work, a community group, even our own families, and the principles of effective leadership, those are universal, not limited to a specific field.
So even though we're looking at a book by a Navy SEAL, the insights, they apply to everyone.
That's the point, right?
Yeah. Regardless of your background, your profession.
And as we go deeper into Willink's philosophy, I think you'll be surprised how these seemingly military-specific concepts can really boost your own leadership skills in any part of your life.
Well, let's get to it then. One thing that I kept coming back to in this book was, like, how much emphasis Willink puts on relationships and trust, both with your superiors and the people you lead. I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense. You can't lead effectively if your team doesn't trust you.
No, absolutely not. And he gives some really specific advice about how to build that trust.
Okay.
Especially with superiors. Like, being honest, even when it's not what your boss wants to hear.
I can imagine that can be tough, especially, in the military.
Yeah.
That hierarchy. It's got to be tempting to just tell them what they want to hear, even if you disagree.
Oh, for sure. But Willink, he says that sugarcoating or avoiding tough conversations, it just undermines trust.
Right.
He believes in being upfront, transparent, even if it means, delivering bad news or questioning a decision.
So how do you balance that? Being honest, but still respectful.
Yeah.
Maintaining that good working relationship.
He suggests focusing on, the impact on the mission, on the team's success. Not being a contrarian, not trying to undermine your boss, but offering a different perspective, helping them make the best possible call.
He also talks about the importance of consistently delivering results, right?
Yes. Building that track record. So when you do have to speak up, push back, you've earned the right to be heard.
Willink tells this great story about a SEAL named Fred to illustrate this point. Fred gets this order, seems totally illogical, but he just does it immediately, no questions asked.
Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah. But it's because of that deep trust he has in his leader. He knows the guy wouldn't give a bad order for no reason. Trusts his judgment even if he doesn't get it.
Powerful example of how trust can really make things happen.
Yeah, streamlines decisions, lets the team act fast when it matters.
Exactly.
It also makes you wonder, what about when you do need to push back against a bad call from a superior?
That's a tough one. Requires real tact, Willink says it's never easy, but it's important to speak truth to power, even when it's uncomfortable.
Okay, so how do you approach that conversation?
He says present your concerns clearly, respectfully. Focus on those potential negative impacts, on the mission, on the team, not personal opinions or emotions.
It's about separating the issue from the person.
Right.
Finding the solution that works for everyone.
Exactly. And sometimes, you might have to push back multiple times or even escalate things up the chain of command. But it's about having the courage to stand up for what you believe is right.
Even when it's risky.
Yeah. This whole thing about navigating those tricky workplace dynamics, it really resonates with me.
We've all been there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Trying to balance your own judgment with what the higher-ups expect.
This constant balancing act.
Requires diplomacy, courage, and really understanding the people involved, the dynamics at play.
Okay, so let's switch gears a bit. Let's get into the core of Willink's philosophy here. The laws of combat.
Okay.
I'm curious how these principles developed in, the high-stakes world of combat, how they apply to other areas of life.
So Willink lays out 4 fundamental laws. He thinks they're essential for any effective team, whether you're in a combat zone or a corporate boardroom. The first one is cover and move. It emphasizes teamwork.
So understanding that the team is stronger than the individual.
Right.
That coordinated action is key.
Exactly. It's like in football, one player can't win the game on their own. It takes everyone, blocking, passing, running in sync, to get the ball down the field.
It's about everyone working together. Everyone has a role to play.
Yeah, relying on each other to achieve that common goal.
Makes sense. What's the second law?
Simple. Focuses on clear communication, having plans that everyone can actually understand and execute.
Yeah.
This is critical in those high-pressure situations where confusion, miscommunication can be disastrous.
So no overly complicated plans, no jargon.
Right. Keep it straightforward, easy to understand.
Yeah.
So everyone's on the same page, execute, even under stress.
Like a cooking recipe. If the instructions are a mess, the dish is going to be a mess.
Exactly. Great analogy.
All right, third law.
Prioritize and execute. Stresses focusing on the most critical tasks first.
Okay.
Avoiding distractions.
Being disciplined, staying focused on the goal, even when stuff goes sideways.
You got it. Identify those key objectives and work through the steps methodically.
Without getting sidetracked by less important things.
Right. Be efficient. Put your energy where it'll make the biggest impact.
Okay, and the fourth law.
Decentralize command. Empowering subordinate leaders to make decisions.
Got it.
Without having to constantly check in with higher-ups.
Giving people ownership, autonomy, trusting them to make the calls in their areas of expertise.
Precisely. Pushing decision-making down to the lowest level.
Where people have the most direct knowledge experience.
Yeah. And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier, about trusting your team.
Right.
If you don't trust them, you're not going to be comfortable giving them that freedom.
And Willink gives some really good examples of how these laws work in SEAL training.
Yeah, he talks about using simulations, exercises to create these ultra-realistic combat scenarios.
So they're not just learning this in a classroom.
Oh, no. They're putting it into practice under pressure.
In situations that mimic actual combat.
Exactly. And Willink, as an instructor, he saw firsthand how using these laws could make a team so much more effective.
Can you give us an example?
He was watching this task unit during an exercise.
Right.
They were really struggling. Poor communication, no decentralized command, confused about their objectives, not communicating well, constantly waiting for instructions.
Bogged down, couldn't adapt.
Right. But then something interesting happens. This young officer, he was hesitant at first, unsure of himself, but he starts applying the laws of combat.
Okay.
Simplifies the plan, empowers his team, focuses everyone on the critical tasks.
And what happened?
The unit's performance, it just skyrockets.
Okay.
They start communicating clearly, working together smoothly, adapting to the challenges. They go from a disorganized mess to a super effective team, all because they started using these simple, powerful principles.
It really shows you the impact these laws can have. Think about teams I've worked with, and I can see how that lack of clear communication, decentralized decision-making
leads to so much frustration, inefficiency.
It really does. But these principles, they apply to any team.
Right.
Doesn't matter the industry, the tasks. Think about your own work. Have you ever been on a team that struggled with communication or felt stifled, no autonomy?
Definitely. We've all been there, right? That feeling of frustration when projects get bogged down by complexity or when you feel like your voice isn't being heard.
Yeah. And that's where the laws of combat can be so helpful. They give you a framework for creating a more efficient, effective, empowered team.
Makes you wonder what would happen if more teams adopted these principles.
Oh, yeah. Imagine the possibilities.
Greater productivity, better communication, a more empowered workforce.
It's exciting to think about.
Okay, so one concept that really grabbed my attention, extreme ownership. Sounds kind of intense.
Powerful concept, for sure. The idea is that leaders are responsible for everything.
Wow.
That happens within their team. Successes, failures, the whole 9 yards.
So no blaming, no excuses, none. You own the outcomes. You learn from every experience.
Whether it's good or bad.
Exactly. Sounds tough, right?
It does. It takes a lot of self-awareness. And the willingness to face your own shortcomings.
Yeah, not everyone's comfortable with that.
Not at all. But Willink says it's crucial for creating a culture of accountability and continuous improvement. So instead of pointing fingers,
you focus on what went wrong, you learn from it, you make sure it doesn't happen again.
This goes beyond just reacting to mistakes, right?
Yeah, it's about being proactive.
Okay.
Taking ownership before things go wrong. He calls this preemptive ownership.
Okay, can you give an example of what that looks like?
He tells this story about a machine gunner who makes a mistake during an exercise, puts the team at risk. But instead of blaming the gunner, the fire team leader, he takes responsibility, recognizes that he could have done more to train and prepare the guy. So he owns it, commits to preventing it from happening again.
So the focus is on finding a solution, improving the team for the future.
Yeah, not punishment, not blame.
And what's interesting is He challenges a junior rifleman to take ownership, too.
Yeah, he asks him, why did you let the machine gunner shoot outside his field of fire?
That seems a little harsh. The rifleman didn't make the mistake.
True, but the fire team leader, he's trying to build that sense of ownership in the whole team. He's getting the rifleman to think beyond his individual role, to think about how he could have helped prevent it.
Creating a culture where everyone's responsible for the team's success.
Exactly. Not just their own little piece of the pie.
This is really making me think about my own role in teams in different situations. It's easy to get tunnel vision, just focus on your own tasks, and forget about the bigger picture.
It is.
Where could you apply this extreme ownership concept in your life?
That's a good question for all of us, right? Where are we failing to take ownership? How can we shift our thinking to embrace it at work, in our personal lives?
Now, in addition to the laws of combat and extreme ownership, Willink has these key leadership tenets. They're like little wisdom bombs, packed with practical advice.
One that stands out to me is, be capable, but don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it.
It's recognizing that even the best leaders don't have all the answers.
Right.
That seeking help is a strength, not a weakness.
It shows you care more about getting it right than protecting your ego.
He also talks about picking up brass, meaning leaders should be willing to do those menial tasks, the stuff no one else wants to do.
Right. Set the example. Show your team you're not above getting your hands dirty.
Lead by example, working alongside them, not just barking orders.
Exactly. And he also talks about leading from the front, but also knowing when to lead from the rear.
Interesting distinction. What do you think he means by that?
I think it's about, finding the right balance between being actively involved and giving your team the space to do their jobs well.
Right. Sometimes the best leadership is stepping back, letting the team take ownership.
Adapting your style to the situation.
He also talks about knowing your ego.
Yeah.
Detaching from that self-importance so you can see clearly. Make the best calls for the team.
Crucial point. Ego can really mess up leadership, cloud your judgment, lead you to make decisions based on pride or self-interest. You can't see things objectively.
So put the ego aside and focus on the team, even if it means admitting you were wrong or accepting someone else's idea.
Exactly. And finally, he talks about not taking things personally, but still being deeply invested in your team's success. That balance between emotional detachment and genuine care.
Having thick skin, not letting criticism get to you,
Yeah.
but still being passionate about your team, their well-being.
All of these tenets, they really provide a framework for becoming a better leader. And he uses all these anecdotes and examples to bring them to life.
Speaking of anecdotes, that story about the CEO who totally misjudges his good news speech, that one really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example of how good intentions can backfire if you don't understand the why behind your message. The CEO's all excited about the company's financial success, wants to share the good news.
Yeah.
And he's met with blank stares, apathy. He was focused on the what, the numbers, but he forgot about the why, how those results actually impact the people who made them happen.
He didn't connect the company's success to his employees' needs and motivations.
Exactly. They've been through layoffs, budget cuts, more work. They're stressed, overworked, uncertain.
So his big announcement about profits and shareholder value, it's completely out of touch with their reality.
Yeah. Shows how important it is to understand your audience, tailor your message to their experience.
It's about making sure people see how their work matters, how the company's success benefits them.
Right. Willink uses this to emphasize that real leadership is about connecting the why to each individual's needs.
It's not about forcing your vision on people.
No, it's about understanding what drives them, what they care about, and helping them achieve their goals.
Creating that shared sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It takes empathy, listening, genuine care for the people you lead.
Asking questions, understanding their perspective, then crafting a message that speaks to them.
It makes me think about the leaders I've known. Some are great at inspiring their teams, others not so much. They just can't communicate effectively, create that shared purpose.
It's a good reminder that communication is a key leadership skill.
Yeah, it's not just about conveying information. It's about connecting on an emotional level.
And inspiring action.
And understanding the why, both for yourself and the people you lead.
Exactly.
That's a great point to ponder as we go into the final part of our deep dive. It's like he was speaking a different language, right? Focused on the numbers, but forgot about the people.
Yeah, exactly. The numbers matter, of course. But he missed what actually motivates people. Job security, recognition, that sense of purpose.
Makes you think, are you communicating the why effectively to your team?
It's a good question to ask ourselves regularly. Do we really understand what makes our team tick?
Yeah.
What their individual goals are, their concerns.
And I think that goes back to what we talked about, building those relationships, that trust.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Without that, it's tough to get people on board no matter how good your message is.
People need to feel like they're part of something.
Yeah.
They got to see how their work fits into the bigger picture.
Wow, this has been quite a deep dive, from like oil platform raids to the subtleties of humility and trust.
We've covered a lot of ground.
What are your biggest takeaways from all this? From Willink's leadership philosophy?
One thing that really sticks with me is that emphasis on constant learning, always adapting. The best leaders never stop growing, never stop refining their approach.
Yeah, it's not about having all the answers.
Right.
It's about knowing that you don't and being open to learning from others.
And that learning, it can come from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Mentors, peers, books, and, maybe most importantly, our own mistakes.
Gotta stay curious. Right?
Absolutely. Always be challenging your assumptions, looking for ways to get better.
Even when things are going well.
Exactly. We often think of leadership as something you either have or you don't.
Right.
But Willink shows us it's a skill. You can develop it, just like any other skill.
That's pretty empowering, actually.
It is. Anyone can be a great leader if they're willing to put in the work.
So it's about cultivating those core principles.
Trust, communication, ownership, detachment.
Finding ways to apply them in your world.
Yeah. If you had to pick one thing from this whole deep dive to focus on, what would it be?
That's a tough one. There's so much good stuff here.
I know, right?
But if I had to choose, I think it's that detached leadership thing.
Interesting.
That ability to step back from the chaos, see things clearly, make the best call for the team.
Even when things are going crazy.
Leading with a calm head, clear vision. Even when everyone else is losing it.
That's powerful. Finding that balance between action and reflection. Leading from the front and empowering others.
Well said. This has been an amazing deep dive into leadership. And as always, we want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay.
Something to carry with you. We talked a lot about humility, detaching from ego.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important to think about ambition.
Ambition.
Yeah. Isn't that what sometimes leads to those ego-driven behaviors?
I'm not talking about ambition for yourself, climbing the ladder, personal game. I'm talking about ambition for the team, for the mission.
I see. Ambition to achieve something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. That drive to make a real difference. Without it, it's easy to get complacent, to settle.
To lose sight of what's possible.
Right. So as you think about these leadership principles, ask yourself, what are you truly ambitious for?
What do you want to achieve? Not just for you, but for your team, your organization, your community.
And how can you use that ambition, that fire in your belly, to become a better leader, more inspiring, more impactful?
Take one of the principles we've talked about. Try it out this week. See how it changes things, your interactions, how you make decisions, your whole approach to leadership.
Yeah.
You might be surprised at what happens.